Chapter 8. Behind Stagecoach Pass, at the center of the dirt trail where Billy and Fred lug around an endless stream of screaming children, stands a mountain. It's a tiny mountain. Well, maybe mountain is too generous a word for it. It's more of a hill, a mighty hill that desperately wants to be a mountain, but a hill nonetheless. I like to walk down Main Street in the early evening as the air starts to cool and the sky turns colors I've never seen before. I stop for a quick visit with Spaghetti, the poor mutant llama. Spaghetti, who understands how it feels to be ostracized by the other kids. If no one is in the soda shop, Henry might be sitting outside on the front porch in one of the old rocking chairs. He always waves at me and says, "Good evening, little Avon." I pretend to be captivated by something way off in the distance as I pass by Bob at the gold mine, careful not to make eye contact with him. Though a trail winds around the hill, no trail goes up the hill, so I navigate around the cactuses that look like ping-pong paddles and giant troll doll hair to get to the top, watching the ground for scorpions and rattlesnakes. The soles of my shoes pick up lots of little cactus needles as I walk, and Mom has to dig them out with tweezers when I get home. At the top of the hill stands an enormous saguaro cactus. It's probably as tall as about 10 of me, standing one on top of the other. It has 7 impressive arms reaching up to the colorful evening sky. Show off. Dad says saguaro is likely over 200 years old. He had to Google saguaros to find that out. I like to sit on the hard desert dirt and think of all the things that have happened in this saguaro's life. It stood here when Stagecoach Pass was built 60 years ago, and when Arizona became a state over 100 years ago. It stood here as the Civil War raged on the other side of the country, when women were finally granted the right to vote, and when Martin Luther King Jr. gave his I Have a Dream speech. Billions of people have been born and have died in its lifetime. And of course, it stood here on the day I was born and will likely be standing on the day I die. I am an entirely insignificant event in the life of this cactus. I try to remember that as the sky darkens and the lights of Scottsdale and Phoenix brighten the earth, millions of lights for millions of people. And then there's just me, sitting in the dirt on a mighty hill, being circled by a poor donkey and a tired camel. So, after all, did it really matter that the kids at school didn't talk to me? That they probably wished I wasn't there, making them feel uncomfortable? That they were afraid of me? It shouldn't have. I didn't want it to, but it did. Chapter 9. I decided to spend my next lunch period in the library. I knew I could get there 2 different ways. The busy route, which went right past the cafeteria, and the quiet route, which went the long way around the office. I opted for the longer, quieter route. Anything to avoid more stairs. As I rounded the corner, I nearly tripped over a boy sitting on the sidewalk up against the wall. I glanced down. He was eating his lunch all by himself. I looked away and mumbled, "Sorry," as I hurried toward the library. As I walked away, I heard him say softly behind me, "That's okay." I entered the library and set my bag down on the table. I glanced around. I only saw one other student and a couple of librarians. Most kids probably like to use their lunch period to, eat and socialize and all of that. I felt a pang of loneliness as I scanned a row of books, searching for an exciting adventure story to take me away. I pulled out a couple of books with my foot and carried them between my chin and shoulder to the table. I carefully set them down as quietly as I could. I sat down and opened Journey to the Center of the Earth. Back home in Kansas, my great-grandma had gotten me an e-reader for Christmas. That e-reader was like a revelation for me. No more cumbersome pages. I could just slide my toe effortlessly across the screen to turn the page. But I still liked to pick up paper books from time to time because I didn't want to get all out of practice page turning. After all, I couldn't get all my school books on my e-reader. Before I had finished the first page of my book, I heard a dog barking. I looked around, wondering why a dog would be in the library. I didn't see one anywhere, but I did see a boy watching me from the far side of the room. He looked away when our eyes met. I felt my cheeks were hot as I turned my attention back to my book. He was probably staring out of curiosity like everyone else. I heard another bark. It seemed to be coming from the direction of the boy. I glanced away. I still didn't see any dog, but then the oddest thing happened. The boy barked at me. I didn't know whether to make eye contact with him or look away. I didn't know if something was wrong with him, like he was insane and could attack me at any moment, or if he was making fun of me in some completely bizarre way. I decided to go back to my book. I excelled at ignoring people. I read for a couple of minutes before he barked again. Maybe I wasn't so good at ignoring people after all. I got up from my seat and walked toward him. He stared down at his book as I came closer. When I was finally standing in front of him, he slowly raised his eyes to my face, his lightly freckled cheeks blazing red, much like mine. "I'm sorry," I said slowly, "but are you barking at me?" I hadn't thought this guy's cheeks could get any redder, but they did. Yeah, he stammered. "I'm sorry. Are you making fun of me?" "Oh, no," he barked again. "I can't help it. I have Tourette syndrome." I stared at him. You have what?" "Tourette syndrome," he repeated. "What's that?" The boy cleared his throat, barked, and then said, "Tourette syndrome is a neurological disorder that causes involuntary motor and oral tics." He tugged on his messy light brown hair in a nervous way. I couldn't believe it. He had just recited his well-rehearsed explanation of his disability, like I had done 100 times before. The boy looked from my face down to my non-arms area and exclaimed, "Whoa, you don't have any arms," in a "were you aware of this fact" sort of way. His response to my missing arms was so direct, I had to smile. I glanced down and shrieked, causing him to jump a little. "Oh my gosh, I knew I was forgetting something today." He sat there expressionless for a little while, like he didn't know what to make of my bad joke. "How did you lose your arms?" he finally asked. I shrugged. "I'm always misplacing stuff. Probably left them in the fridge when I got the milk out this morning. Really, they could be anywhere." He grinned, then barked. "Were they amputated for some reason?" Usually people pretended they didn't notice my missing arms at all, or acted weird about it, like those girls at lunch yesterday. It was a relief to have someone be so honest about the thoughts in his head. I sat down at the table and leaned in close to him. He did not lean away from me. Instead, he leaned closer. "Have you ever been to a circus?" I asked, before beginning my newest story, one I hadn't gotten to try out yet. "No." "Well," I said, "I used to be a trapeze artist. You know what that is, right? Don't they, hang from ropes and stuff? Like acrobats or something?" "Oh, they do a lot more than that. They do all kinds of tricks, like swinging from the ropes and doing flips in the air before grabbing another rope. They often work in pairs, with one person holding the other person and swinging them up in the air, catching them after they've done a flip. Super cool stuff like that." "Awesome." He was clearly impressed. "How did you do that with no arms, though? Did you, use your legs like a monkey?" "No, I used the arms I used to have." His light hazel eyes grew wide. "Used to have?" I nodded. "Yeah. You see, my partner and I were trying out this new routine. I was going to flip 3 times in the air before he caught me by the arms. But the speed I needed to do such an amazing stunt was just too much. When he caught me," I closed my eyes and breathed in deeply for drama. "When he caught me, my shoulder sockets came loose and my arms tore right off." He gaped at me. "What?" "It was awful," I went on. "Him just hanging there, up there, holding some arms, blood showering the screaming audience. It was all over the news. Didn't you see it?" We continued staring at each other like we were in a contest to see who would blink first. Finally, he grinned a little, then a lot. Then he started laughing. "You're totally joking," he said, and laughed even louder. I was happy he found my story funny. "Keep it down, Connor," a librarian said as she walked by with a stack of books. "This is still a library." He smiled at the librarian, then barked at her. As she walked away, he turned back to me, still chuckling. "That's Mrs. Wright. She's super nice. She lets me sit in here during lunch, even though my tics are sometimes really loud. Hardly anyone's in here during lunch, so it's the best part of my day." He tugged at his hair again. "So is that what you tell everyone? That your arms were torn off in a circus accident?" "No, that's my newest story. I was born like this. The truth is boring, totally boring, so I make up stories for fun. I have lots of them if you'd like to hear." He nodded. "What's your name?" "Avon." "I'm Connor. I would shake your hand, but..." He motioned toward my armless area, blinking his eyes rapidly and barking as he did so. "But you have horrible warts all over your hands," I said. Connor laughed again. "You're funny, Avon." I blushed. My skin is so fair, even the slightest flush to my cheeks makes me bright red. I was probably neon right now. Once I googled excessive blushing, and I found out there's a terrifying name for my condition: idiopathic craniofacial erythema. I went to school the next day and dramatically announced, "I have idiopathic craniofacial erythema." My teacher called my mom out of concern for my health that evening. Connor blinked rapidly and barked again. "How long have you been going here?" "I just started a few days ago," I said. "My family and I just moved from Kansas." "Kansas?" Connor repeated. "Ever see any tornadoes?" "Sure. We had a storm cellar and everything. A lot of people do." "Did you ever have to get in it?" "Oh, yeah," I said, "but luckily our house never got destroyed or anything." "I thought you were going to tell me some crazy story about how your house getting swirled up in a tornado with you in it or something," he said. "No, I just tell stories like that about my arms. Though, come to think of it, losing my arms in a tornado would be a great story. I can see how a tornado would suck them right up." I pondered this for a moment. "I'll have to think of one later." "Cool, I can't wait to hear it," he said. "I'd love to see a tornado." Connor jerked his head and barked again. "So, why'd you move here anyway?" "My parents run a place called Stagecoach Pass. We actually live there, if you can believe that." "That's so cool," Connor said. "Not really." "No, it is. I live in an apartment really close to it. My parents took me once, but I haven't been in a long time." "Well, you're not missing anything," I said. "So don't worry. Do they still do gunfights?" "Yes." "And camel rides?" "Yes." "And gold?" "Yes." "Cool," Connor said. "You should stop over sometime," I told him, "since you haven't been there in a while, and you live so close. I can even get you a free ice cream cone." He looked uncomfortable at the invitation. "Maybe. I don't really like to go out a lot." "Oh, okay." I watched him as he continued to blink his eyes rapidly. "So all these things you do," I said, "like the barks in your eyes and the jerks and all that, that's from your Tourette's." "Yeah, it really sucks." "You can't just hold it in like a yawn?" Connor nodded. "I can for a while. I've tried before to act normal just at school and hold in all my tics. It hurts though. It's really, really hard to hold them in like that. And then when I get home, it would be a tic explosion like you can't imagine. It really upset my mom, and I would be so exhausted from holding them in all day and then letting them out all night that I couldn't even do my homework or anything. So I don't try to hold them in anymore." "Can you take medication for it or something like that?" Connor shook his head. "I tried some medication and it didn't help. It made it worse, actually. And it made me super tired all the time. I could barely get out of bed." "Isn't there anything else you can do?" "Sort of," Connor said. "Before my parents got divorced last year, I was seeing a therapist. But my mom's too busy working now, so I don't go anymore." I frowned. "How do the other kids treat you?" "Okay. I guess most everyone is used to it by now. Sometimes I get made fun of. I'll hear kids barking in the hall or whatever. And some days, when the tics are extra bad, I hear some of them laughing. One time I heard a couple of kids giggling behind me in class, and when I turned around, they were mimicking me, jerking their heads. I cringed. That's terrible." Connor shrugged. "I think some of them assume I do it for attention, but I don't care. Most people I meet think I'm doing it deliberately at first." I bit the inside of my cheek. I had thought that too. "Do you have any friends?" I asked. Connor shrugged again. "I've only been here a year. My mom and I moved to the apartment near Stagecoach Pass after we sold our house, so I had to change schools. It's been kind of rough coming to a new school and all that. I guess that's why I spent a lot of time in the library." "What about you?" "I haven't made any friends here, but I had a lot of friends back home in Kansas. I guess because we all grew up together. No one thought I was weird or anything. They were just used to it." Connor nodded. "Yeah, I had a couple of friends in my old school who didn't get annoyed by my tics, but I don't really see them anymore now that we live so far apart." Connor rolled his eyes and blinked rapidly. "Has anyone been mean to you?" "No, not really. They just act weird around me, you know? Like they don't know whether to look or not, to ask about it or not, but no one has talked to me like I'm an actual person." Connor nodded in understanding. "People act like that around me too, except I think it's that they don't know whether to laugh or not. Like they're not sure if they're being mean or whatever. Some people just ignore it, like it's not even happening. I guess I like that the best." "Some people do that to me too, but in my case, it's kind of ridiculous," I said. Connor jerked his head and laughed. "Yeah, like my armlessness is something that could slip by someone. I mean, how unobservant do you have to be to not notice that someone doesn't have arms?" "I'm pretty unobservant, and it only took me about a minute." "My point exactly." The bell rang for class to start. and my happy mood sank. I wanted to stay there with Connor. It was nice to have someone to talk to besides my parents. I guess I better go get my bag. I stood up from the table and looked down at him. I'm glad I stopped in here today. Connor looked back up at me and smiled. Me too. Chapter 10. On Sunday afternoon, I wrote another blog post. When you have a malformation, yuck, I hate that word, like I do, you definitely have to deal with the usual looks. The most popular look I get is the one I like to call the I'm so cool, nothing phases me, not even your missing arms look. These are the people who pretend they don't notice my missing arms. You could also call this the sure, I'm totally used to seeing people with no arms look, or the I have tons of armless friends look. These people are just way too blasé about it. I mean, come on, you really don't notice my missing arms? Because I can tell you do by how you refuse to look at my torso, like the whole sun is sitting on my chest. Just go ahead and look, for goodness sake. Look and ask questions if you want. These people try way too hard. Then there's a look I like to call, oh my gosh, I'm staring at your armless area. Just kidding, no I'm not. No, I'm not staring. No, I'm not. These are the people I can clearly see staring at me out of the corner of my eye. But as soon as I look at them, they look away. Seriously, people, you're not fooling anyone. Just keep on staring. It's okay to be curious. Everyone is. There's also the dreaded pity look. The, oh, you poor thing with no arms look. These people not only look at me, but they give me a pitifully sad smile when I make eye contact with them. They should save those looks for starving homeless orphans. Being armless isn't that bad. And then there's the worst look of all. I have to deal with it because it comes almost always comes from little kids who haven't learned manners yet. It's the I can't stop staring at you because you're a freak look. Sometimes these looks end in screams and kids running away. I stopped typing. The post sounded all lighthearted and haha funny, but I didn't write that I ignore these looks to the best of my ability. I didn't even write that I pretend they don't bother me. Even after 13 years of seeing them, they still hurt. I also didn't write that the last time I got one of these looks was just the day before, while I was grocery shopping with Mom. Mom likes to take me grocery shopping with her. She says it's because I need to learn how to grocery shop on my own, but I really think it's because she likes having a child slave to command. So Mom basically makes me handle all the groceries in the store. I have to get the canned tomatoes from the bottom shelf, the soy sauce from the top of the shelf. I'm so flexible, it would blow your mind. The cereal from the middle shelves, the bag of apples from the produce department. We go with bagged produce, so I'm not putting my feet all over the fresh food in front of people. And yes, even the rotisserie chicken. The rotisserie chicken was sort of a disaster, but that's not the point of the story. The fact that it takes us 3 hours to go grocery shop isn't the point either. Sometimes I wish Mom had some other hobby besides teaching Aben how to do stuff. So I was in the cereal aisle trying to slide this box of Corn Puffs out from the shelf with my foot. I had just finally gotten it wedged between my head and shoulder, but as I stood up, I turned to drop it into the cart. I caught this little girl standing in the aisle giving me the dreaded, I can't stop staring at you because you're a freak look. I stared back at her for a moment. You got a problem with Corn Puffs? I said. Her mom's head shot up from reading the label on a box of instant oatmeal. She saw what was going on and grabbed her cart and daughter and scurried away. I acted all cool, like I couldn't have cared less about it. But I still remember it happening. I remember every time it happens. When I was done writing my post, Dad asked me to help him put some fresh paint on the flat wooden pictures standing by the front entrance to the park. The kind with cutouts people can stick their heads through for photographs. I seriously doubted anyone took pictures with the faded wooden figures, but I agreed to go with him because I'm such a good daughter. I could see why he wanted to freshen them up. The paint was so faded, you could hardly tell what they were anymore. And one of them looked like you were sticking your head through a giant boot. Not exactly the family-friendly image we were going for. Dad put a chair out for me to sit while I painted with my foot. My painting skills aren't exactly the finest, but I can manage large, simple pictures. Just don't expect me to paint your portrait unless a stick figure face is acceptable. As I worked on turning the boob back into a small hill with a barrel cactus on top of it, I saw Connor walking over the bridge that connected the parking lot to the park. The bridge was built to go over a wash. Washes are like empty riverbeds that run all over North Scottsdale so that when it rains, the water can flood the city in an orderly manner. Connor didn't have to go through a kiosk or anything like that as he entered the park because admission was free. All the money made was from paying for the many attractions we had, if you could call them that. "Hey, Connor," I said as he walked up to me, barking a few times on his way. "You came." "Hi, Evan," he said, looking around and squeezing his hands together. "There aren't very many people here." "Oh, this place is always dead," I told him. Connor seemed relieved. Dad looked up from painting the gun in a cowboy's hand. I thought it was a sea cucumber, but a gun made a lot more sense. Why would the cowboy be pointing a sea cucumber at people as they entered the park? And where would a cowboy in the middle of the desert get a sea cucumber from anyway? "Who's this, Avon?" Dad asked. "Dad, this is Connor. We met at school." Dad reached out his hand and Connor shook it. "Nice to meet you, Connor." "Do you mind if I take a break?" I asked Dad. He looked at my handiwork so far. "It definitely looks less boobish, so I guess you're free to go." I handed him my paintbrush, slipped my shoe back on, and walked off with Connor down Main Street. Connor suddenly chuckled beside me. "It's just so cool that you live here." I scowled at the comment. "So, what have you been up to?" "Oh, nothing," he said. "My mom's working all weekend, and I got tired of playing video games, so I thought I'd walk over and see if you were here." It made me feel good that he had come here just to see me, especially since he mentioned not liking to go out a lot. "I like to play video games." He looked surprised. "Really?" "Yes," I said, annoyed at his look of surprise. "I can play. I bet I could kick your butt at just about any game." "Are you challenging me?" Because pretty much all I do when I'm home is play video games. I'm like a professional video game player. "We'll just see about that," I said. "Does your mom always work on weekends?" He shrugged. "Yeah, she works all the time. She has 2 jobs. He shrugged again, and I realized the shrugging was another one of his tics. I wondered how many different tics he had. "What does your mom do?" I asked. "She's an ER nurse." "That's cool." "I guess," Connor said, "except I never get to see her." "I'm sorry." I didn't know what else to say, so I walked up to the porch of the soda shop and sat down in one of the rocking chairs. Connor sat beside me. I tried to think of something else to talk about. "My mom took me to this cool instrument museum yesterday. Have you been there?" Connor shook his head. "I don't get out much." "Do you play any instruments?" He shook his head again and barked. "No." I waited for him to ask me if I did. He didn't, and I figured it was because he assumed I couldn't. "I play." I hadn't meant to say it with quite so much sass. He looked surprised again, of course. Why were people always surprised I could do stuff? I bet I'd get surprised looks if I told people I can breathe air without help, or swallow my food, or pee in a toilet. "What do you play?" he asked. "Guitar." "With your feet?" "No, with my belly button." Connor's eyes widened. Then he pursed his lips in a little smirk. "You're joking again, aren't you?" "Yes, I play with my feet, not my belly button." "Awesome," he said, rocking in his chair and blinking his eyes rapidly. He did look impressed. "Play for me sometime?" "I've got to see you play with your feet." I shifted in my seat. Sure." I didn't tell him I also wrote my own music and sang. In 5th grade, I had come to the realization that it was far more productive for me to channel my creative storytelling into songwriting than to only use it to shock people with more morbid horror stories about my armlessness. I had written several songs since then. Most of them were pretty bad, like "Take an ice pick to your own ears" bad. A song I wrote about learning how to put on my first bra immediately comes to mind. A couple were possibly worth playing, but the only people I'd ever played for were my parents. "Do you ever see your dad?" I asked him. His expression turned somber, and I was instantly sorry that I had asked. "Not much." "That's too bad." I rocked in my chair beside him. He and my mom used to fight about me all the time. He looked out at Main Street as he spoke. He didn't understand why I couldn't just hold my texts in. It made him angry. He always said to me, "Connor, why don't you just knock it off? Look how upset you're making us. Just stop it." And my therapy bills were expensive, and my dad didn't want to pay for them anymore. He wanted me just to take the meds and stop ticking, but they made me feel awful. I think my dad would have done anything just to stop my tics. And when he realized they weren't going to stop, he couldn't deal with it, so he left. "I'm sure your parents had problems that had nothing to do with you or your tics," I said, thinking Connor's dad sounded like a real jerk. All their fights were always about me, my ticks, my bills. I can see why they can't stand me. I can't stand myself most of the time. I wish I could hold the ticks in and pretend to be normal. I didn't know what to say to that. I was sure Connor was wrong about his parents. I couldn't imagine parents being like that. I'm sorry. I wish I could grow arms and pretend to be normal. The corner of his mouth tipped up a little. I still don't completely understand why you can't hold your ticks in. I know you said it hurts, but why? Connor thought for a moment. It's like when you have a bad cough. You know, when you get that tickle in your throat and you really want to cough, so you can concentrate really hard on holding it in, but it's so uncomfortable, and eventually you just have to cough. That's what it feels like to not tick. Like this painful feeling in my chest builds and goes up to my throat until I just have to bark. Or it builds in my eyes until I just have to blink to relieve it. Then it builds again, and again. It never goes away for long. It always builds again. Oh, I said, that's really weird. Why does it do that? Connor shrugged. It's some kind of malfunction in my brain. Can you get brain surgery? Connor laughed. That seems a little extreme. I guess they can do surgery, but only if the Tourette's is super bad and dangerous. I can live with mine, so I'm not going to do any brain surgery. That would be scary. Yeah, I guess that would be pretty risky. I grinned at him. I don't think I could do an arm transplant, even if it were possible. Could have some scary side effects. Connor raised his eyebrows. Oh, yeah? What kind of side effects? Like, what if the arms came from a serial killer and they just had to keep killing people, even on someone else's body? Or the arms were too dead, and then I had these zombie arms attached to my body. Too dead? Yeah. Or what if they had naked lady tattoos all over them? Or what if they had terrible nail fungus that slowly spread and took over my whole body? You've thought about this a lot. I sighed. You have to think about these things in case an opportunity ever arises. I glanced over at the petting zoo and I saw Spaghetti sticking his mutant head over the fence. I wondered if he was looking for me. I visited him several times a day to pet him with my foot and tell him how adorable he was, for his self-esteem. Since none of the other kids wanted to pet him, I felt like it was my sole responsibility to improve his ego. Come on, I said, sitting up from my rocker. I want you to meet someone. Connor followed me across the street. I stopped when I reached Spaghetti and nuzzled my face to his. This is Spaghetti. Connor patted Spaghetti's head without flinching. He's cute. Spaghetti is a mutant, I said, kissing his head, like me. You shouldn't say that about yourself. Connor gave me a stern look, like he was my dad. I didn't mean a creepy mutant, I said. We're, like, cool X-Men mutants. Connor smiled. Oh, well then that's okay. We left Spaghetti and walked back to the soda shop. Henry stepped out onto the porch. I thought I saw you out here, Avon, he said. Hi, Henry, I said. This is my friend Connor. I felt a little warm fuzzy in my chest when I used the words, my friend. Henry smiled at Connor and then turned back to me. You all ready for the next rodeo? I glanced at Connor. I'm not going to be in any rodeo. Henry laughed. That'll be the day, he said. A rodeo without Avon. Well, say hi to Joe for me. He started to walk back inside. I don't know any Joe. I called to Henry. Do you know Joe? Henry just chuckled again and did that same hand wave like he had when I told him I didn't know anything about tarantulas. You're such a joker, he said, then turned back and went inside the soda shop. That was weird, Connor said. Who's Joe? I don't know, I said. The owner of the park's name is Joe Kavanaugh, but I guess no one ever sees him or seems to know anything about him. The accountant told my parents he never visits the park. I leaned in and lowered my voice. And get this, pictures of the Kavanaughs in the museum here have been removed. That is strange, Connor said. I wonder why. I don't know. I found this old storage shed behind one of the buildings, though. It has 7 do not enter signs on it and an old broken handle that was padlocked. I couldn't get the doors open, but you might be able to. You want to try? Connor nodded excitedly. Yeah, let's go. I led him down the short trail until we reached the old wooden shed. It looked like it was on the verge of collapse, much like several of the other buildings at the park. See all the signs, I said? Cool. I wonder what's in here. After a few tugs and grunts, Connor was able to slide the door open enough so that we could squeeze through the opening. I scraped my nose a bit on the old wooden door, and I hoped I didn't get any splinters in my face. Getting them out wouldn't be fun. Connor and I looked at the stacks of boxes, the piles of junk, and the shelves with old books and papers and props. Where do we even begin? I said. I looked up and saw a box perched on top of one of the old bookshelves. The writing on it was faded and water-stained, but I could just barely make out 3 letters. A, V, a water-stained space, and then N. Check out that box up there, I told Connor. He looked up and read the letters. A-V-N. We stood a moment in silence before Connor barked, startling me. Avon, he cried. I snorted. Of course not Avon. I thought for a moment. Kavanaugh. Oh, right. Connor smacked himself in the head. Stupid. He stared at it for a while. How do we get it down? I looked around the room for a ladder or something. I could try headbutting it off the shelf, I said. Connor laughed. If we can find something for me to stand on, I think we can get it down. We found a little table covered in old documents in one corner of the room. Connor moved the papers off of it and dragged the table to the bookshelf. He climbed up and brought the box down, then placed it on the table and opened it. This stuff is old, he said, pulling out a book that looked like it had been completely soaked in water and left to dry out in the heat repeatedly. Though it was badly damaged, we could make out the big, hairy tarantula on the cover. More tarantula stuff, I mumbled, studying the cover. What's the deal with the tarantula stuff? Connor asked. Someone here was really into them. There are tarantula pictures in the soda shop and a tarantula display in the museum. Connor pulled out another book, a sketchbook. The pages made brittle, crinkling sounds as Connor turned them. Careful, I told him, as the corner of one of the pages broke off. We studied the sketches. There were several drawings of horses and stagecoach paths. And of course, tarantulas. There was also a detailed sketch of a necklace with a blue stone in it. Connor pointed to the date on one of the pictures. 1973. Someone made these over 40 years ago, he said. We looked through the rest of the box and found some horse figurines, an old hairbrush, and a glass case that reminded me of an aquarium. Why would there be an aquarium of all things in here? I said. He shook his head. Maybe it's for something else. I carefully turned the fragile pages of the sketchbook with my toes and stopped on a sketch of a tarantula. It's quite lifelike. Someone had spent a lot of time sketching every tiny hair on each of the 8 legs. Someone who clearly had a serious interest in these giant spiders. I think you're right.